game work far beyond my wildest dreams. I see a beautiful girl with colorful hair that will soon fall in love with me. Sometimes it's cold outside, just wanna get under the sheets. Then I see your empty bed, I just wanna go to sleep. One day you gave me your number with 7 kisses and no hugs. But it turns out that were kisses. There were 7 deadly exes, and I have to save my life from getting beat up.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is another Wednesday, another episode of the Mattriarchy. I am, as per usual, your host, coming to you from gorgeous Scottsbluff, Nebraska. It is a beautiful, beautiful autumn up here. I love it. I am today, of course, joined by the usual cast on this pilgrimage. We got the metal.
Hello.
We have Cartoonicus.
Stay tuned.
And, of course, the ever-present and laboring Twitless.
What's up?
Dude, first of all, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. I know you've been busy. I know school is bearing down on you. And thanks for taking the time. It means a lot to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
school is kicking my butt, but that's what it's supposed to do. Yeah.
Well, yes, but courage, man. I know you can do this. Believe me.
I have to. I was gonna say I have to. My wife will literally kill me if I don't.
Ooh, that sounds bad.
I don't think. Yeah, so failure is not an option at this point.
Yeah. Well, pull it off, man. Okay. Anyway, but with that, there is some housekeeping. Like we have to talk. If you follow me on Facebook, if you follow me on Twitter, the X, you'll notice that I posted a schedule today because we have stuff coming up next month. And so we've been trying to work around Twitless' school schedule. But because we're locking stuff in for next month already, we have to be hard and fast with the next 2 weeks. So hopefully that'll work out for you, man. But we got the show's coming up and Thanksgiving and everything.
Right,
so,
right.
You know, we I don't want to be ungracious, but I'm afraid I might have to be.
No, I will. Yeah.
Especially because Volume 5, I really want to hear what you have to say about Volume 5. But tonight we are talking about Volume 4, Scott Pilgrim gets it together, and plus bonus material. And I have read the 6 volumes previously, but I had not read the bonus material that the metal introduced me to until we were preparing for the show. And some of it was ridiculous, and some of it was great. So, what did you guys think? How did this week hit you on the first impulses?
You mean the last 2 weeks?
Well, yes. But this episode's reading material.
Sure.
The first brush.
Twitless, you want to go first?
Nope.
All right, then. I will.
It's amazing.
You asked. Okay.
Yep, that's what happens when you ask.
I'm going to get my images up right away, actually. Because, all right, so the title of this book, Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together. I'm not so sure how accurate the title is. He does start getting some things together, admittedly. Other things, not so much.
Yes. Oh, and I think the most amazing thing about this book is he actually realizes he needs to get things together. Like, we've seen 3 volumes of everybody telling him what a loser he is. And then all of a sudden he's like, wait a second, I'm a loser.
The comic, the franchise, Scott Pilgrim, got it together. For the first time reading this gosh darn series, I can actually say, and I cannot believe these words are about to come out of my mouth, that I enjoyed reading this book. The dialogue was fun to read. The plot held together in ways I could understand. The artistry was almost kind of beautiful, actually. Overnight, I went from just nearly hating this franchise to what the heck is going on?
Congratulations.
And I'm trying to find, gosh, everything looks the same. So I'm trying to find where my illustrations start. Hey, you know what? I can just go anywhere. Oh, here it is.
That's amazing. I'm going to guess
examples here. There are some really great jokes, like this one right here, where he must be playing a game upstairs. He says, "Now, great, I'm dead." She says, "Oh my gosh, you killed him." Like, that is really, really clever. I cracked up at that. And
it's not really a joke, but it might be. It is. I agree.
Fun,
I agree that I agree.
Dialogue that I can appreciate.
I can agree with
immediate. This one here. Who the heck is Jason? The guy with the car. I know a guy with a car. But this is actually fun dialogue. I was having, for the first time, I was not rushing through pages because it was such a slog to get through. I was slowing down and appreciating nearly every piece of dialogue as great dialogue. And I'm like, what happened?
This is, I gotta go to we got some fire in the chat. Jim Tudor says, this is a twist. Now the anticipation for the other guy's opinion. It's like watching somebody join a cult.
One of us.
So, okay, see, that's the thing, right? Is that one way or another, I do have to admit, and you probably noticed, I've said something a little better about each book as we've gone on. The first one was really the worst. What that means is, if this keeps going at this rate, if the first book was possibly the worst comic I've ever read, I'm worried that the final book might just be the greatest comic I've ever read. And I can't handle that.
Wow.
So, I had to stop. I was making horrible noises over here. Seven asks, never read the comic, saw the movie. How faithful is it? Relatively. We're actually going to talk about that.
I would say fairly.
It's fairly though.
Yeah.
Like, the first volume is almost exactly reproduced in the movie. But they started writing the movie. It was originally supposed to be a 3-parter. Film trilogy, and they truncated it into a single film, and the series wasn't done when they were making the movie, so they had to extrapolate parts of the ending and consolidate it, but like a lot of the basic plot points are pretty much the same. So
yeah, There are some other minor differences, like the characters, personality-wise, I feel got reinterpreted in the movie version, and also, which like, we will talk about this when we get to the bonus stuff.
Yeah,
my brain farted right there.
I like it.
I like that new word.
Yeah, reinterpreted. It fits Scott Pilgrim.
It does.
Yeah, but they reinterpret it, and some of the bonus stuff, which really didn't fit cleanly in, were used to basically give the character of Roxy, who we'll go over in this book, more to do because she barely does anything by comparison to the movie in this book. So,
well, and I think that's really fitting, but I don't want to get into that until we get into it, because of the nature of Roxy's character.
Yeah.
But because Roxy represents something in the story that is absent from the movie, pretty much. But I don't want to get into that too much right yet. So, the other thing is the big fight scene between Roxy and Ramona in the movie is a composite of the fight scene with Roxy and the fight scene with Envy in book 3, and with the supplemental bit between books 3 and 4. Abigail asked the question specifically of the metal. Which ruined a generation more, the comic or the book? The comics or the books? I assume you mean the comics.
Been watching a certain
comics or the film. I would say the film.
Yeah, definitely the film. Most people have never even read the comics.
Yeah.
The people I know. The thing is the
people I know who like went to like Comic Cons and were like, I almost dated a chick who basically had a lot of issues, and her thing was, I'm going to dress up as Ramona Flowers, go to the Comic Con, and it was very clear like she had not read the comic. I think she'd just seen the movie. So the what is it called? BPD, the BPD disorder chicks who like magnetized to this film like a super magnet. I think magnetized to the movie and not the comic.
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
The
borderline personality disorder.
Yeah, the movie sort of described Ramona in that, what's that stereotype? The
manic pixie dream girl.
Manic pixie dream girl. Thank you. But that's really, I mean, it's kind of there in Scott Pilgrim, but not completely as much as it is in movies like Almost Famous or oh, come on. Brain is totally dead. It's got Liv Tyler in it, and that kid who was Scooby-Doo in the made-for-TV live action or made
Garden
to
State.
No. Garden State has the Manic Pixie Dream Girl too, and so does. But on the one I'm thinking of is Empire Records.
Okay.
Chasing Amy does sort of. It's trying to subvert the thing, but it was already like a massive part of pop culture before. Brian Lee O'Malley is pulling from a whole block of 90s movies. So,
well, the thing
if anything, he kind of subverts it with Ramona in the comic.
Yes, I would agree. I was going to
say, I think Ramona really stands out as this very particular visual and kind of character, especially the whole, strong, independent woman thing. When, as I'm reading the comic, I feel like she gets, like, there is one particular scene where she really even looks anything like that. And I swear she seems to get more and more girly with every passing scene that goes by. Am I not wrong?
No. That's. I mean, she's becoming more vulnerable to Scott as the story goes along.
Comfortable.
This character is not the stereotype she became, after one movie.
Yeah. Well, and part of it is the movie doesn't have a lot of bandwidth for Ramona's story
or time, right?
Yeah.
Because the events of the movie are compressed in like a week almost. Right. Like it doesn't have the months that the story is being told in the comics, like even in the world.
It's just funny that she gets characterized for this whole idea when it's like that's not even her.
Yeah. Well, and it's well, I mean, and the course of the graphic novels is supposed to take place over like a year and a quarter. So, so it starts in the winter and it rolls through summer, fall, back into winter, and then into spring by the end of volume 6. It'll probably be early summer in volume 6, but
Yeah, but like a good way to like frame Ramona is she's just loosening up because she is a character who is basically on the run. She was running from her old life. So she's tense, not open to people. Now she's been kind of like moved into this friend group. So it's not even just Scott. She's friends with Scott's friends, right? So she's opening up to basically everyone.
So
in some ways,
I
Scott's
also,
friends know her more than Scott does.
yes, that's absolutely, especially in volume 4, we really see that be a thing.
I want to highlight the fact that sometimes pop culture flanderizes an element.
Oh boy.
And so the idea here is when people kind of the song everyone should go listen to. I completely agree. It should totally be the theme of at least one of these discussions, in my opinion. Scott Pilgrim versus the World ruined a whole generation of women. The idea there is it's not necessarily how the character plays out in the comic. It's the fact that the character was something that the aesthetics of and the idea of was something that people could latch onto and go, oh my gosh, that's like totally me. And, take that and run with it and use it to encourage their worst behaviors when the graphic novel may in fact be saying something slightly different in some cases, I guess.
Well,
so
I think a really good comparison is Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's. If you really pay attention to the movie, and it's a tragic story of a person who's trying to escape their past and live beyond their means and everything else. But if you pay attention, there's a lot of consequences that come home, and the weight of this girl's problems are really apparent. But that's not the pop culture image of it is the glamour and the frivolity. And all that.
To be fair, there's a lot of guy movies like that too, where it's like, hey, that guy's kind of the villain. It's like, no, I totally think he's amazing. Like he's the best character. And it's like, well, the film is trying to say that guy is not.
Right. But the reason what I bring up with Breakfast at Tiffany's is I think that's a very one-to-one relationship with Ramona Flowers' character. Holly Golightly and Ramona Flowers are nearly the same character.
But yeah, I mean that's what I said from the beginning because it's also Scott and her as well because it's the idea of that unconfident guy who doesn't really know what he's doing with his life, who gets everything changed by this crazy quirky girl.
The other side I really want to stress here is the fact, and this is something that I won't be able to say entirely until I get to the end of the series but the idea of, and this is actually going to be a theme with me today, the concept of arrested development, the delayed adolescence concept. These like almost the entire cast of characters are they are post-high schoolers who still act like they are sophomores because they're sophomoric, I think. And so this that's the other side of the aesthetic that I think really channels into I think it channels to millennials really well. It may channel to others in addition to that. But the idea of like, I'm an adult, but I completely am not ready mentally, spiritually, and financially for it. And so it's like you mentally retreat back to and that attitude, which we've seen in our culture, people have constantly said about the millennials that they don't grow up. And the Scott Pilgrim is clearly trying to play with that idea, but then also like have a message about growing up in it. But people could easily latch on to just the meme not growing up part.
Right. This reflects back to something we talked about months ago, right? It's not video games that are the problem, right? In life, it's what we're doing with our video games. So
why does this focus entirely on video games?
Well, and this goes back to something we're talking about the millennial impulse. But I also want to go and point back to like this the theme of Arrested Development is like the entirety of Kevin Smith's like catalog. and
it's not just millennials, but
so it's not just millennial. I mean, that's very much part of the Gen X lens as well. But yeah,
I think it takes on a particular flavor in the millennials. I think the Gen Xers, there's a particular flavor to it. I think
a big part of that difference comes down to like the latchkey kidness, you know, of Gen X, the whole the Cold War mentality and all that kind of stuff too.
I want to point out that millennials are the generation where it suddenly became not only acceptable but cool to be a nerd. And that's got to play into it because everything that is thought of as nerdy tends to easily be also thought of as kiddish.
Yeah, but that was, I mean, you know,
I would say there's a weird ironic tinge to it.
Yeah, there are elements of that preceding that, but it definitely it became acceptable because anyway, moving on from the battle over whose generation is nerdier, because we could do all day about that, and that's a stupid argument. I was about to keep going without counterpoint, but that's dumb. So let's go ahead and talk about our supplemental materials. Does anybody happen to have the PDF loaded up? I have not yet.
Oh, I got tons of pages here, though. They're all individual, so I'm not going to be able to scroll to anything.
We got don't use over with Kevin Smith. He's not worthy. Okay.
You tell me what scene we're talking about.
I can load up the PDF I put together because it's got that first in there. I just have to find it quick.
Can we start actually going back to the last book and something we never talked about, which was really the first time I saw a joke. Oh, I can.
Okay, you go ahead and look up your.
The first time I saw a joke that I really, really appreciated.
All right, I got to interrupt here because like I didn't get a chance to say my thoughts, and everyone keeps using the word. Everyone keeps using the word. Oh, sorry,
man. Oh my goodness, no, you're right. I'm so sorry.
I was totally fine with you skipping, but then people keeps using the word joke, and that's actually something I need to talk about. So because it's basically my entire contribution to the conversation here. Because for me, the reading here was very much my feeling of it was pretty much the same so far. This series is not for me. It's not going to be for me, and I can appreciate that. I think the cool thing, and this is something I think our audience can get some usage out of, is that if you're in something that is not entirely to your taste, it's also a learning opportunity, because oftentimes you can learn about your own values, your own approach to art. You can actually learn a lot about yourself if you're reading something you don't entirely click with. So one thing that occurred to me is that there's a difference, and I'm not even saying that it's wrong. Okay, I'm just saying that it's different. But there is a difference between the approach to humor here and the approach to humor I tend to value. Not to brag, I am a somewhat experienced humor writer. I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I am a somewhat experienced humor writer, having written over 500 comic strips. So I have written over 500 punchlines. And I have a heavily committed to in Superschooled, by the way, superschooled.com if you want to check that out. But I have committed myself to trying to avoid a huge pitfall that many webcomics have fallen into, in my opinion, in the past. It was even something that was documented like on TV Tropes and some other things, which was the idea that a strip would start off being funny, and then some years into its run, because it was a webcomic, it would just become about something else. The author would get tired of writing the gag a day, and then would start making the comic kind of art from life or drama. Like they would often find threads between characters, and so a strip that would start off being funny would suddenly be about a soap opera. And as someone who has written for over 4 or 5, how many years have we done this? Gosh, it's been a while. When did we start? 2015, 2016, something like that. Gosh, that makes it almost like 6-7 years, something like that. Anyway, so as someone who's written for over half a decade, I can actually resonate with this idea that it's you have to renew your energy. But I have committed to Superschooled is supposed to be funny, and so because of that, I try to write with a comedic structure. And the comedies that I tend to love the most, the ones that I continually rewatch, tend to have high levels of wit or farce. And wit is intelligent wordplay and setup, and farce is situational humor. And so Arrested Development, it's funny, the concept of Arrested Development, one of my favorite comedies is called Arrested Development. And in an interview with the creator...
Really good for 2 seasons. And after that, it's very mid. And then crap.
Do you know why, actually? Because for the first 2 seasons...
it's because all the writers are committed leftists and they can't make jokes stick long term.
Well, no, actually, that's actually not the reason. The reason is you were halfway there. The reason is because I attended a panel with one of the head writers, and he said that because I asked him, I said, every joke here, every frame has got like 4 jokes in it. And he said that their scripts for, because the guy, head writer, used to work on My Name is Earl. He said Arrested Development, he said, My Name is Earl scripts were around 30 pages, and Arrested Developments were around 70. He said, that's how much we put into the show. And he said, it was utterly exhausting. After the first 2 seasons, most of the writing staff quit.
Whoa.
So exactly where you're talking about, the writers who were putting 70 pages worth of development, which is funny because the show may be called Arrested Development, but the script was one of the most developed like on television for a comedy. Like they all burned out and left. So the thing is that humor, in my opinion, the humor I tend to gravitate towards is the type that has quite a lot of development. And often it can require you to have a expanded awareness of not just of what is being said, but what is not being said. And this is where I have to give a depressing story about the current generation of youngsters, because I'm a huge fan, of course, of Mark Twain, who was very witty, high degree of wit. And I recently taught some Mark Twain to my students, and all of them said he was boring because none of them understood it. And my jaw hit the floor because I thought Mark Twain was still think Mark Twain is one of the best humor writers in all of English literature. And this is kind of when it started to hit me that Scott Pilgrim is funny, but it is not funny for the reasons that I find things funny. It is, and this is another thing that I think makes it an artifact of either millennial or at least 2000s era humor, where things are funny because they are emphasized or they are supposed to be funny, or there isn't really a joke in terms of like structured setup. And I'm not saying that there are no jokes in Scott Pilgrim. In fact, when there are jokes, I often crack a smile. But a chunk of the humor is simply, it just is funny. And, either something is just sarcasm, okay, an emphasis essentially, which is often not particularly high on the scale of wit, or just Scott's stupid, and because Scott's stupid, we're just going to keep hitting that hammer, dong, dong, dong. And that's fine. Again, I am not criticizing this. I am just saying that it has finally occurred to me that the type of humor I tend to like is elevated wit and farce. And Scott Pilgrim, and this is going to be the biggest irony, I think, of today, but Scott Pilgrim to me is an example of, in many cases, a witless style of humor. And that's extremely funny in an ironic sense, considering my handle is Twitless. But that's kind of where I fall on this. So I'm starting.
I find it ironic because one of the things that made me like this book particularly, I did feel was a lot more wit that the others did not have, or were often trying to have, but they fell flat. And like I'm just saying, I actually appreciated the dialogue.
I cracked a smile here and there. I'm just saying that I think that some of the reasons why I cracked a smile were because it was just the humor was, and this is something that I think Malley does. He brute forces the humor. And that's another kind of 2000s mimetic type of thing where it's like there's no wit to it, but if you brute force it hard enough, you can sometimes crack a smile just because out of sheer audacity. And that explains a chunk of internet humor, and that I think it partially explains why none of my students got Mark Twain. They're used to humor being brute forced to them, and that's fine. I'm not even. I'll admit I have lost touch with the current generation. I completely admit all of those things. I even admit that Scott Pilgrim is funny. It's just not funny for the reasons that I typically tend to value in what I look for.
Let me give talking about. There's a motif that goes through this book specifically. It seemed to pop up. He must have just had an idea, and it continues coming back in the artwork. And I do appreciate that because it's able to, hold the story together, hold the book together as a piece, as opposed to a bunch of random individual jokes. But would this kind of thing be what you're talking about, where where they're literally inserting visuals outside of the story to make jokes that aren't actually happening in the universe?
So here's my thing. That Bono panel is essentially, in my opinion, even in context with the previous ones, it's almost a one-panel joke. It's not really a joke, but it is funny. And like I said, I'm not going to deny that there's some humor here. 1 million hours later, that's hyperbole, and because it's so hyperbolic, it brute forces a smile out of you. And I think
it's totally a joke. The man lives in an RPG.
That's not really. It's not really a joke. There's not that much of a. There's not really structure and wit to it. It's just it. I acknowledge it's funny. I'm just saying it does not have the structure of wit that I'm used to seeing.
So when you ingest food, what do you think those nutrition facts in the back are supposed to tell you?
I'm sorry. What?
What?
Right. When you ingest food and it has a label on it, what do you think those nutrition facts are supposed to tell you?
If it's,
I'm not following.
No.
It's
okay.
supposed
to keep the
They're
company
power-ups.
Well, okay, so back to
our bodies run on micronutrients.
Yeah, that's not really well set up as a joke. I'm sorry. It's not witty. It's not
that
witty.
high context. You've got a guy. It's
not
built in a world where a dude's getting loot from punching his girlfriend's ex.
I would argue it's low. I would argue it's very low context, and that's just like, okay, that's fine.
This right here was the very first time.
It still kind of cracks a smile. And the example I was going with wasn't even the nutrition facts one. I was going with the 1 million hours later one, and with the work concept.
But I brought it up because he talked about that.
I'm not saying there are no jokes, zero here. I'm saying in terms of the humor it tends to gravitate towards, I find it to be brute force humor, which in my opinion is lazy. And as someone who works very hard, the amount of I think this is also why I personally don't resonate with it. Because I have written over 500 punchlines and I have put myself through hours, days of labor to make almost every single one of those punchlines have like structure and wit to it on some level. I think that's what's rubbing me. I think personally that's what's rubbing me the wrong way. As I'm like, this guy's taking shortcuts. I can see the shortcuts he's taking to brute force the humor.
The funny
thing is, it's still funny and it's more successful than I'll ever be. I acknowledge all of those things.
Don't say that.
No, I'm serious. There's clearly something he resonated with. People, like I said, the students I'm teaching will resonate with Scott Pilgrim way more than Mark Twain. I have to realize that. They sat there, looked at me, and were like, "This was boring. I didn't get it." I had to make my peace with God. That it's like this is how the youth today process what's funny. They do not. It is what it is. I'm just saying that this is why it rubs me. I think it's
really interesting.
It's what different
because I don't know if you noticed this. I figure you would have said something if you did, and there's some of it in the previous books as well. This time it really came out a lot, and that is a lot of the, call them whatever you want, the funny points in this book. I felt are the exact kind of thing that we would put in Super School. And that is in that, like I was saying, this kind of stuff is not particularly so much a part of the world building, like, oh, there's a super highway running through your head or you're going to turn into coins. It's almost as if like he could be looking at actual nutrition facts here. And this is for us, the audience, a little bit of fun eye candy to make a secondary.
That's fine.
Right?
No, that's exactly the point I'm making. Is that there is humor there. It's just not the type of it is the humor I will tend to use the least. For me it's garnish.
That's funny because I feel like we use that all the time in Super School.
I use
actual
It's never the
or
punchline. It's
rarely-
always
rarely
it's
is actual
garnish.
punchline.
It's
but it's-
garnish.
yes,
yeah,
always
I'm fine with the garnish. I don't want to derail things
So
too
that's
much.
the funny thing.
That's kind of where I'm at, and I think that explains a difference of approach. That's all
What
I'm
I
saying.
found
I'm not
was
judging it. I'm just saying
I
it's different.
appreciate, from the beginning we talked about our problem with the whole series is that, the strange, ununified or unconnected detail between a normal slice of life stuff and this crazy, video game / meta science, other stuff that comes out of nowhere and hits you, right? The thing I like about these kinds of stuff is that because they're that visual garnish, I don't have to take them as part of the world building. I don't have to take them as, why in the world is this happening? I can just appreciate a nice little
and some of those I did. I would say this comic
that
also
was a lot of this comic, in my opinion.
This comic also had, I think, the first moment where I felt bad for Scott, as opposed to feeling bad for other people because.
Well, that's because this was the first book in which he actually resembled anything of halfway decent human being.
So there's definitely and the author knows that this is a turning point in the series. It's literally called Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together or whatever, and even if he's just starting that first step of 1,000 miles, he has in fact started it.
Right.
And it's very clear that that's part of that arc, and I think that turning point is it is a turning point, and so it's got all of the earmarks of that moment in a narrative, and I think honestly, and I think this is something I want to hear from the panel, but I think we can all agree and say this, that I think when it comes to story arcs, turning points are often the best part of a story.
Oh, yeah.
Resolutions often let us down, but turning points are like the best moment of the Lord of the Rings for a lot of people is the turning of the tide. It's not even the end of Return of the King. It's just the moment when right after things get kind of sucky, but this is the turning point, and you can imagine how much better things are going to get. So
I learned, and this is why I sometimes disagree with Rhys when he's being, what's the word? A stickler about certain superhero characters, personalities, etc. Because one of the most powerful things you can do, especially for drama, is have a character act out of character, because it shows just how much they have been affected by whatever situation is going on. Now you have to do it right. You can't just say any acting out of character automatically means something. But yeah, I learned this a little while ago, that sometimes the greatest moments are when the tough character sheds a tear for the first time, or two characters who absolutely hate each other, one inexplicably says something great about the other simply because the alternative would be such a downfall or something. Those can always be the moments that stick with you the most.
That was my very long-winded rant for.
You are fading out.
Let's move on.
LDR.
So, in the intro, we've got the supplemental stuff is a bunch of little notes on the characters as they're going about their daily lives in between the stories. Kim's dissatisfied with her roommate situation. The band is not being very successful. All that kind of stuff. Boilerplate. It adds fun bits to the texture, but nothing that moves the story along a lot until this free Scott Pilgrim Free Comic Book Day edition, which is part of what we were looking at before.
The Wonderful World of Kim Pine, though.
Oh, are we going back?
If you actually want like your slice of life stuff, that's where he does the slice of life really well, is in the Wonderful World of Kim Pine. Yeah,
and I thought it was really fun to see her. It's Kim doesn't get an adequate amount of space in the books until volume 5. She's such an interesting character, and I absolutely love her open disdain for things. that is present there. So
You
seeing
would.
her.
She's such a kindred spirit with you, I think, in some
Oh
ways.
yeah, absolutely.
You love to grouse, and she's a grouse.
Wait a minute. Is Kim actually the author's insert?
I
Telling
don't think so.
Scott what a
I don't
terrible
th-
person
no.
he is?
No, I think it's probably a case of like several characters represent his point of view. It's probably Scott
Right.
at some points.
Every
Kim and
character
others.
other
Scott
than
is
Scott.
the most him, but yeah, it's probably scattered throughout a bunch of the
Yeah,
characters.
he's probably a little
Really?
Scott,
You
a
think
little Wallace.
he's Scott?
Dude, Scott's family is basically his family too.
Well, then I mean, he like concocted this and wrote this during his courtship and marriage, his ex-wife. So that was all part of the. He ended up marrying an American cartoonist, and so that's definitely a factor in a lot of things.
Interesting.
So, but the other thing that I love about this soda bit, in addition to the little gags in there, is the fact that it goes through all of this effort and then pay right there. That's the actual punchline to the bit. Scott never considered that he would have to pay. And that's hilarious to me.
I like the
So-
note on this page for the
Oh,
background.
yeah,
It's like,
this
I'm
is
pretty
great.
sure I'm not getting paid for this, so here's just a stock background.
Of an actual place in Toronto. And that's one of the
So I don't think that was in the version I read, right? This must be one of the ones that you were saying. They
yeah,
changed
this was the
between black and
this
white.
was from the Free Comic Book Day edition. So
Okay.
it may not have had that note in the colored edition. And maybe they actually went through and actually drew a background in there.
Let me double
for that
check. Sometimes
edition.
it's nice to.
Yeah, I don't.
It's fun to point those differences out. Let me double check.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
also
I will
like
say
fair
again,
to say
Garrett, I got
black
it up.
and white is the best.
You want to put
Yeah,
that?
yeah. There are big differences. They're subtle, but sometimes those subtle differences do matter if you're considering picking these up.
That's interesting.
Well, that seems right.
Now, I
they
gotta
did-
say, the visual here is actually kind of interesting. I could go for an entire comic that had live action backgrounds with 2D characters on it.
Well, then you should go check out
Oh, I hate
Buckskin Boone in New York City.
Ugh.
We
sorry,
used-
no, I'm
we
saying
used-
off to you. I'm just saying. Sorry.
We used
You
that
remember
bit.
Nightwing?
I personally. Go ahead. Sorry.
We used that a bit in Buckskin Boone in New York City because we were drawing it at a time when neither of us had a lot of time. So,
My personal favorite story of yours.
oh yeah, thank you. When we wrote it, we didn't think it would even be any good because we were just so rushed with everything in life at the time. But I really liked how it turned out. I went back and reread it a year later, all at once, and it was much better than we thought it was.
Jim Turner
Yeah.
says, "Yeah,
Yeah. In defense of whatever that is, they didn't split up until quite a few years
2014.
after Volume 6 was done. 2014 was it?
Yeah, so it was 2 years before he started Snot Girl.
Yeah. So that probably didn't, but who knows? I don't know.
I don't care if
Yeah, it was Hope Larson was who he was married to.
I don't care if
Sounds
Scott Pilgrim
familiar.
does end up being like the
She's done
greatest
Batgirl.
comic I've ever read. There is no way I'm reading a comic called that.
Not
Is she the one
girl.
who did modern rain boots Batgirl? Is that her?
2017 Batgirl, Volume 1.
Rain
Okay.
boots.
Yeah.
She did like the worst version of Batgirl, who basically looks like she's in like a raincoat and
Oh, yeah.
rubber boots.
She also did like an adaptation of A Wrinkle in Time and a bunch of other stuff.
I don't know. I'm starting to side with O'Malley here.
Well, in fairness, that was what they commissioned from DC. So blame the editors as much as the artists. Let's take a look at the colored edition version of this page. Yeah, that is drawn in for a later scene. Oh, that is so funny. Look at that.
That's interesting. Okay.
When they re-released it in color, they just drew it, and so they colored it.
And
Took out the
I
little
wonder if
editing note.
he even did that because that does not look like his style.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, he didn't color it, so I'm guessing that was entirely the editorial, like the people who picked it up to do the color edition.
It's kind of
That is so
cheap.
funny.
I
to
really
me.
don't really like it. I
Yeah.
much prefer that live action version.
with a little editor note.
Huh.
I love it. Seven says at least they could posterize it in Photoshop. That's true. They definitely could have done that.
I don't know. There's some good humor to this though, especially because the whole thing is like, I'm not getting paid for this, so
Yeah.
here.
The note is just so much fun. I love that so much. Abigail says, I remember Hope Larson. Her art
Like I
is
said, that's the kind of thing that I can laugh at because I don't have to try to make sense of it. I just take it as that kind of, breaking the fourth wall. Go with it.
So, Hope Larson's art's cute, but her original stories are kind of mid, in her opinion. So that's something. Okay, wait. I'm trying to scroll on that screen. I can't do it. Can't do it from in here. Not today was all about free stuff. Okay. So as they're gone, the premise of this short story is that Wallace has invited them out to see Brokeback Mountain. But they don't ever use them. They just the gay cowboy movie. And while they're after the movie, they're going around talking about the thing, and all of a sudden, Scott gets attacked by these manifestations of this teenage movie star actress.
No, which a good note for those who have only seen the movie. This is the character who was playing opposite of Lucas Lee in the movie they were shooting at near the beginning.
Oh, I hadn't picked up on that.
Yeah, Winifred Haley.
Yeah, there you go.
So they did squeeze her in.
They did squeeze her in. Okay, that's crazy. I hadn't picked up on that. And so they're going to try to attack Scott, and he doesn't want to fight these little girls, and they just start to kick the crap out of him. But they said it. Here's a little link to it. Wallace and Ramona are talking. Maybe it's some kind of ninja magic triggered when he walked by the posters. Your guess is more or less as bad as mine. What ninja could possibly have a grudge against Scott? Is one of your 7 evil ex-boyfriends a ninja? One or more of my exes might be a ninja. Yeah. I love how the non-committalness of that makes it funny to me. Well, eventually, Scott discovers that, like, by accidentally hitting them, they disappear because they're just made of paper anyway. And Scott doesn't want to punch a girl because they're girls, right?
And this is kind of a funny joke.
Yeah. So then Ramona comes up and punches for him, right? And this is the bit they used in the movie. When in the movie when he's fighting with when there's the fight with Roxy, they do the same bit.
Yeah, because she's like, only Scott can defeat me with his own hands. So Ramona's like, okay, fine, I'll use his hands, basically.
Right. And the one thing I really hate in the movie too is Scott and Ramona have a fight right at that moment, and that fight's taken from like the 5th volume, but it doesn't mean any of the same things it means in the 5th volume. And so it really feels like really cheap in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like the whole exchange is out of place. But
that's a lot of the movie in general is like, this happened in the comic, but it doesn't have the weight that it happened in the comic. Actually, almost reminds me as the entirety of Batman v Superman.
I was just gonna say, so it's basically Batman versus Superman.
Because it has none of the weight of the actual story that it has.
Wow, you two on the same wavelength there.
That movie is so bad.
That's funny.
Okay, I gotta stop thinking about it. We gotta get through this book. We haven't gotten to the main book yet. So, and the paper turns out to be a free beverage at a participating mini mart, which I think is hilarious. So, the whole thing. So anyway, moving on to the book. So, this is 3 months. Is it 3 months or 2 months after the end of the 2nd volume? I can't remember. It's something like that. Or the previous volume, the 3rd.
Mentioned, I want to say it was 3.
I think it's 3.
I also have not looked at this since last Wednesday. I haven't read it again So I want to say 3, but they're at
Yeah.
They immediately jump us to kind of like a beach party where they are at, I think, Julie's aunt's place, or she knows the people who own the place.
Yeah.
And that's why they're there.
As
They're kind of like
always,
bumming. You know.
I gotta give credit to the title page.
Oh, you like the
we'll
Sonic
get
the
to that here.
Hedgehog?
Right.
So, but yeah, and so they have Scott Pilgrim gets it together.
The little
And let's
Sonic
see
and
here.
Tails going on
Oh.
here.
Well, yeah, and the which is funny because Sonic and Knuckles was their band was the Scott's band in high school, right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
Sonic and Knuckles again. Anyway,
Well, and their hair
also,
almost kind of matches. If they had made Ramona's bluer, height they're switching places, but she is really kind of more the Sonic between the two. Scott's kind of like a Tails.
That seems fair. Although, Julie, those two make my mouth taste like throw up. And Holly says it's probably the only time I'll ever agree with you, but I agree with you.
I'm pretty sure that's Kim.
Is it Kim? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I got the names mixed up for a second.
Yeah.
We haven't met Holly yet in the story. So,
well, not in
no,
this
no, no.
book. We have met her.
Oh,
she's in the last volume.
you're
I'm
reading
getting
this
things
in
mixed around
black
my
and
head.
white.
Yes, I'm reading this in black and white.
Oh, that's the deal.
Because it's better in black and white.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
but
black
you don't
and
know who
white,
anybody is.
See, it's probably because I've read this so many times. I can look at somebody and be like, just like the way their hair is in this part of the book. I'm like, oh, that's that character. Like I just
No,
you kind of
the
just
bigger part
become
is that
familiar with
I
everyone.
got people's names mixed around in my head for a second. That's part of what my problem was.
I'll
So,
admit, a lot of the names they just like.
that's more of a cognitive issue than it is a brain issue. So at the beach party, everybody's out there. They're doing beach party stuff. Knives is still hanging out, but things are weird with Neil. 2 months off. There we go. It's supposed to be Julie's birthday.
Well, it's also Stevens. It's halfway between them. So it's like, since
Right.
mine was last week
Right,
and
right.
hers is next,
But
they're
it's
both
like-
in play.
Well, I mean, to hear her talk, it's all hers.
Yeah. This is another line from that made it to its way to a movie. I think you're the nicest guy I ever dated. That's kind of sad. Scott having some actual self-awareness for a second.
And
And
again,
the beginning of self-awareness.
some dialogue that I like. It's like,
Yeah.
I laugh at that.
Well, I think it's funnier. It has more weight here than it does when she says it at the end of the movie, because that's where it makes it, at the very end of the movie.
Yep.
But here, Scott kind of knows people don't like him to some degree, right?
Mhm.
Like they like him, but they don't. It's a love-hate relationship when it comes to Scott.
Right.
In the movie, by that point, they try to make Scott completely sympathetic to some degree. So like it's sad in like a pathetic way. But here, it's kind of sad. It's like, this guy's a jerk, and he's still the nicest guy that you've ever dated.
Right.
So
And the fact that he's, they know how to present it too. He's sitting there with a mouth half full of food. That's kind of sad, just saying it ever so matter of factly, right?
Sorry, I'm remembering something else to think. So moving past the stuff here. So basically what we have going on in the book is Kim moves in with Holly, which is what I was getting screwed up earlier. And Holly's roommate has an in-home studio. And so Steven says, like, holy cow, you've got a studio. We need to make an album for my band. And the roommate says, okay. And so that becomes one of the big themes, is that instead of going to shows and playing live in front of people consistently, Steven spends the whole book hanging out with Holly and Kim's gay roommate,
Joseph.
cutting Joseph. Thank you.
Right.
Cutting.
There's
their
also
Sex Bomb album.
This is the beginning of Steven's downward spiral that we'll see in this, the next book, and going forward.
Because I didn't get what was the deal with him being so obsessed with recording now. They never really addressed that in the end.
He wants, it's that idea. He's treating the band
The next
as,
step of the band, right? Like if
Right.
you have an album, if you have an EP or whatever, you're official. You're not just playing shows anymore, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
'Cause,
and
like-
part of the thing is this comes on the tail of all that weird stuff that happened with the Clash of Demon Head, because Steven and Scott had originally been in Clash of Demon Head when it was something else. But they'd been in the band and they were about to get signed, and Scott wouldn't sign it over, and he was a co-owner of whatever their gig was. And so when Scott walked, Steven walked, and Natalie found new musicians and got big. And so with all of that, it's alluded in the last volume that Steven's feeling really insecure and jealous because he had a chance to be a rock star, and Scott kind of screwed it up. So I can't remember what the name of their band was now. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's just trivia. So, so this is what's his name? It's Steven's quest for relevance. Very 90s sort of music mentality. You play in the garage, you do small shows, you make an album, then you're a rock star. TM. Yes, very much so. Which is like the arching plot of like how many movies from the 90s. So, yeah, you make your demo tape and you get it before a producer, and you're golden. It's Airheads, it's freaking That Thing You Do, it's all sorts of stuff. But it's a cliche of 90s stuff. Also, Ramona's apartment has like 2 floors and a balcony. What kind of an apartment has she got? I mean, what does being an Amazon delivery driver pay in Canada in 2003?
Well, when you're the only one.
Well, and you have the ability to use space-time differential to get that package there in like what, seconds?
I want to make a comment here. I want to make a comment here that I said that this was and this is something Jim Tuner and I I think are on the same page here. This is an artifact of 2000s, and one of those. And there's what's interesting is, and I 2000s comics are artifacts in some ways. 2000s entertainment, because things like the smartphone revolution. There's only a couple revolutions of the technological type it hit. And so, people weren't like glued to their smartphones. Like that's just like our reality now, that type of thing. But in addition to that, and this is one that I think is interesting, and I'm not entirely certain how accurate this statement is, but I feel like that there's economic things in the 2000s that are no longer the case now, with like our levels of hyperinflation. The fact that you could be
this is even before the 2008 recession too.
Yeah,
like the fact you could be.
This is to flash back on something, right? So like my first job out in the world was I was working night receiving at Walmart, and I was making like $4.75 an hour back when minimum wage was $4.25, right? Gas was $1, was hovering around $1 for almost a decade. Yeah. And I was able to, like, there was one week, I tell my kids this and they don't even believe me. But there was one week when I was between paychecks and I had nothing. And I went through my car and found change that fell out of my pocket, and it got me to and from work for a week with just like whatever 73 cents or whatever I found on my floorboards.
Okay,
can't live that life anymore.
I want to stress that point, okay? Because it actually is relevant to the plot here. Scott is able to exist in a pre-2012 world, because, and it's like, and that itself is a kind of fantasy in 2023. The idea that you could, like, the fact that there's those panels, if you want to pull them up, he pulls out what's in his pockets, And the reason why he has nowhere to go is because he only has 1 penny. But if he were able to scrounge for the cushions, the implication is the implication is that he's been able to exist for several years out of high school, no job at all, essentially bumming around, scrounging those coins and so on, living that kind of way. And it's like,
well, see, I thought mainly he was just mooching off of everybody else.
No, he's doing that too. I'm just saying that, like,
well, and think about it, like he lived at a time, right, where he could afford to, his friends could afford to have him mooch off of him, and they weren't like sleeping 3 to a bunk. They weren't like,
well,
they're making the minimum wage job, and they can have a moochy friend. And you can't. Yeah,
they're okay. They're mad at him, like they're angry at him all the time, but they're okay with him mooching. In today, they would have just kicked him to the curb already.
For survival. For survival. It wouldn't even be like they're mad at him. It's the fact that, like, dude, like, I'm already drowning. I work 3 jobs. No, like, I'm serious. That's what.
No, I'm not. I'm not laughing because I disagree. I'm in the field. You are not incorrect.
The point I'm making is that Scott Pilgrim is a fantasy of in today's perspective. Like this world.
When this was just I'm completely honest. This was the life I lived, right? Like, I didn't mooch off of my friends, but we had people crash with us, and it wasn't even a big deal because there was plenty of food to go around, and we lived in a house with the 4 of us, and we were paying pennies for rent. Yeah, so we were able to. This was the life I lived. This was where I grew up.
So
and at that time, I was beating up people for money. They didn't explode into coins, though. I had to actually get it from them.
Here's the thing. See, I know I'm going to jump ahead here, but this needs to be addressed. Putting up something right now. We're told that these guys are having to share the same mattress because they have no money. They're about a month behind in their rent and about to get kicked out. Yet he's having a party with martinis.
Well, yeah, because Wallace spends his money where he feels like spending his money. Wallace isn't a good guy.
This whole time as
he's a credit card guy.
Scott is mooching off Wallace.
They also compare. They show that's the other thing. The other bit of fantasy. There's a panel that literally has their grocery receipts, and I think it might be a photocopy of a receipt from O'Malley or something.
Yeah, I didn't know.
And you can see how some of the items that he's purchased are like 100% more expensive nowadays or something. Like just like they've like doubled in price.
I don't think it's a photocopy. Because the same font that wrote everything has a note on the bottom telling you like what belongs to Wallace and what belongs to Scott.
Okay. Right.
But yeah, no, it's what everything is way cheaper than it would be now.
Yeah.
So Jim Tudor's speaking my language here. Evictions and martini parties.
Yeah. Like you that's actually a mark of like how do I put this? That's actually one of the symptoms of people in poverty is the fact that they buy they're spending the money on the alcohol and not on the groceries that will last them a long time.
I always get the impression like that they're trying to portray Wallace as the responsible one. And
that's by degrees. That's by degrees. That's by degrees. He's more
by
responsible.
Comparison only.
Yeah. Like Scott has 0 responsibility, and Wallace is like level 2 out of 100.
Yeah, Scott's like still mentally in high school, while Wallace is like in his 2nd or 3rd semester at university level of maturity.
Yeah. Like at this point, Wallace has definitely contracted some horrible disease that he doesn't know about yet.
Oh,
so, carry on with that.
Oh, that's okay. They've got items for that.
Oh, God.
Hey, Canadian healthcare. Maybe he can get in before it gets bad enough so it's fatal.
Correct.
Moving on. One of the things I wanted to stop on this page, in addition to talking about the apartment, is this line. Scott says, "The hair on your head, I know of it." Well, you haven't done anything crazy to it in like a month and a half. And she says, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm letting it grow out. I should dye it again though." What does it mean? Nothing. But it does absolutely mean something. And that's one of the keys that's going on here is that Ramona has her own changes of going on with that, and so okay, I got to stop here.
Yeah, because she's not really running from herself
interesting
anymore.
point. It was a symptom of a crazy society, upside down values that ended around 2008. It was fun, but the book is also looking at something that collapsed. That's a very good way of saying it. Very good way of saying it.
Are you saying that society doesn't have upside down values?
Well, they're not the same upside down values. The idea that coming out of the 80s and 90s that there wouldn't be a crash, that we'd figure out a way that there would just be, a continual economic growth.
Yeah,
the idea that you could work the same job for 20 years and are guaranteed
without really being without being promoted.
Or like you could live month to month off of a credit card and then just pay it off at the end of the month or anything like that. Like people basically just live on debt.
So yeah, anyway, that was a thing. And it's still, I think it's still possible. It just takes more intelligent thought than existed then. But back to the subject of Ramona, that Ramona's hair's growing out. She hasn't changed the color on it, and that is indicative of something that is going on. So, and also we have the other comment here that she makes. All this insightfulness is unlike you. that they're getting to know each other, and it's a weirdness. So. So, yeah, moving on to the next big thing, so we can go ahead and move things along a little quicker.
We also find out that Scott is such an idiot. He's never bothered to learn how old his girlfriend is.
Yes, and that's actually
because you don't ask a girl her age.
You do when you've been dating for like ever. You find out birthday, you find out what's your mom's name, whatever.
Other ways
mom is still 29.
Gleaning that information too, right? You can get that information from somebody even without being rude about it, directly asking.
Yeah, you let it slip. Oh yeah, I was born in blah 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 year, and he says actually there's a line in the thing. How am I supposed to know? It's unknown. Your age is unknown, which is a meta reference to a lot of the liner notes in the story. And then she says, "Dude, you could ask." And then he asks, and she says, "I'm not telling," and it's awkward. So, so the next big thing that happens in the story is that Scott is looking. It's too hot, and so Scott's looking for someplace to be. He goes to the local mall, and he ends up. Here's his pocket, stuff in his pocket. He's got a single penny, a lint, a rock from the beach, a doodad, a guitar pick, and he runs into this girl. And this is Lisa, who that was in book 3. We're introduced to. I think it was book 3, wasn't it? It is Scott's friend from high school, who was in the band back in northern Ontario, and so they have a flashback to the previous discussion about that. Lisa Miller, right?
Yes.
Who becomes a significant part of this volume of the story because Kim's living down there, and she and Kim were friends, and she and Scott were friends, and Scott and Kim were friends, and so there's all this going on. And that is a little weird because they have a history, and Scott's at dating Ramona, and there's this whole thing. It becomes a plot point in like the 3rd act or whatever. Well, they can't really break this volume down into a 3-act formula. It's kind of all over the place with that kind of a thing. So, now, one of the things I wanted to talk about with this is we talked about this last week, the idea of that the number of characters could get so big, right? They start blending together, right? But I think that Lisa is an important character in this volume, especially because it highlights the place of Scott's past and how it is affecting his present. I found that to be impactful. We could talk about why a little bit later if we want to, but what do you guys think? Was this addition of this other character too much, or was it useful, do you think?
Well, she's one of the few likable characters in the entire series.
Like instantly likable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a. Once again, we have a new ex for Ramona and a new ex for Scott. And I had brought up in the third book, is it possible that what we're doing every time is that Ramona's ex is supposed to be holding up a mirror for who Scott has been in the past with somebody else? If that's the case, I'm not sure I'm putting that together this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I would agree that Roxy is definitely not a previous Scott, but she does give Ramona. Us something. She's a previous Ramona. Yeah, exactly, because she says the one thing when we get to her bit in a little while. It gets the one thing where Scott that tells Ramona exactly who Ramona has been. And all the other characters have alluded to Ramona's past. It's not said it specifically, but Roxy specifically says it. And that's really something, I think. So.
And what is that? I'm not putting that to you.
Well, I don't want to, we haven't even gotten to that part yet. So I don't want to get too far ahead of us on that. So, one of the other things that's going on in the story is Scott and Lisa are getting to meet other people's. Scott and Lisa are going around meeting with Scott's friends and trying to find Kim and the whole business with that. And we also see that Knives is still hung up on Scott. And is starting to question why she's hung up on Scott. And then we have that Scott suddenly discovers his need to get a job. So let's move past some of this stuff onto the job thing. And
I've got one for you if you want.
Okay. We'll go ahead and bring this up here while I'm looking for the thing.
Sorry, I didn't change over to it. I love how he likens getting a job to a video game. So it's more or less like a video game, you're saying? Kind of a job system?
It's like a Final Fantasy reference right there.
Let's say I haven't played Final Fantasy, so I didn't get it. Other than this, that it was like a video game. But yeah, so Scott decides he needs to get a job. And then he also, when he's hanging out with, is it with Lisa or with Kim that they suddenly they're getting hunted down by the mysterious man with the sword?
It's Kim.
That's with Kim. Yeah.
Is it with Kim?
I remember because Kim has some of the greatest dialogue.
The setup, right, for when he comes here, he went to Kim first to see if he could get a job at the video store, which obviously he couldn't with how much money he and Wallace owe the video store. She's like, it's okay. I've got a hookup. You might be able to work at Steven's place. Right. So she leaves because the store's dead anyway and takes Scott over there.
This line had me rolling on the floor. Scott, if your life had a face, I would punch it. I would punch your life in the face.
Which that one made it into the movie, at least the first half of that line.
Yeah, it did.
Really,
it did,
I did not remember it at all. This hit me out.
Yeah, it was earlier. It was when he talks about having broken up with Knives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they're sitting on the bed in I believe Steven's bedroom.
Yeah, and he's like, "Want to hear a song I wrote?" I said, "Where's Knives?" "Oh, we broke up." And that's what she says that there. So there's a mysterious man with a sword, which hunts him down through the course of the book, and it involves Scott's actually able to open up a subspace door, and there's a whole thing with that. It turns out that it's Knives' dad who had seen this picture of Scott in Knives' room, and then had seen Scott out in the world, and hunts him down, almost costs him his job, and it's part of the big climactic scene that shows up at the end of the story with Roxy. But it's just it's a brief thing in the I mean, those scenes are interspersed throughout the rest of the story. So I don't want to spend a whole time talking about every time he shows up, because he shows up a little at different
Oh,
times.
and
So,
Knives' dad completely cut out of the movie. Like one of those things that, much like Lisa, this book is probably the one that had the most stuff cut from it in the movie.
Well,
and
there's
part
a
of it
ton
too
of-
was to give more weight to Roxy as a character.
right. Well, and almost all of that, and almost all of 5. Like,
Yeah.
5 is basically like just the musical number with the twins, which doesn't even happen in the book.
No, it's way more fun when we get to it.
Oh yeah,
We're not gonna
Well,
ruin it yet, but it's way more fun with the twins.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. Anyway, so Scott gets his job. He gets extra experience for that. We've got
Scott,
the
I'm
whole
sad that I'm
fight
about
scene.
to die, but I'm not sad that you're about to die. I just want you to know that. It's brilliant.
I'm not sad that you're about to die. I just want you to know that. So, and more of. So,
Also,
sorry, but
did anyone look at this character and think, I need more cowbell?
no,
Oh, you're
not
talking
before
about
you
the
mentioned it.
landlord. Yeah, no, I did not see like a
Really?
Christopher Walken. Come
I'm
out
alone
of
in
it.
that? Oh, dang.
Well, and this is the fellow who rents out the basement to Scott and Wallace, who's
Yeah.
basically not renewing he's not renewing their lease. He's going to allow them to go month to month, but they can leave if they want. And Wallace is just like, awesome, I'm going to leave. And so Wallace tries to guilt Scott into figuring out some other place to live, maybe move in with Ramona since things are going really great there. And Scott's going to go live with his unseen gay friend. So
You mean
Yeah,
Wallace?
so
mobile.
right? So one of the things I like about this, though, it does say a lot about Wallace's character, because he was trying to push Scott to leave and try to like guilt him into moving in with Ramona, but he does mention that if he didn't, it would be awkward for Wallace, because Wallace would have undone his plans and stayed with Scott, because his loyalty to Scott does matter more to him at the end of the day.
Well, and one of the fun things this volume does too is it also talks about Scott and Wallace's relationship. And one of like how they got to know each other. And Scott doesn't even remember. Wallace just appeared, because that's basically what happened. Wallace saw this dude and he felt like he needed someone. And so he just started showing up constantly. So the way that
Wallace and Lisa came into his life in the same way.
In the same way, exactly.
Yeah.
The way that he and Wallace became friends is very much like the way he and Lisa became friends. And even though Wallace doesn't like Lisa, they actually fulfill a similar role of somebody that points out Scott's nonsense, although they do it in very different ways.
Though I think this is also kind of the perspective of how everyone enters Scott's life to him, right? Like Ramona's pretty much, even though she entered his life first, technically by going through his head with the subspace highway, is pretty much the only person he sought out, right? Like even when he was dating Knives, it's because of she dropped her stuff from running into him and he helped her pick everything up. Everyone just kind of falls into Scott's life that he knows, right? And he's like oblivious to it. It's like, as far as he knows, somebody just showed up in his life one day and now they're part of the people he sees every single day.
Jim Tuner, it's like the 90s version of Vanity Fair or a Jane Austen novel. Yes, that's very true. Very true. And a lot of it is because these different interactions, and one of the things I really like about it is it shows ways that Scott, it demonstrates through life events to Scott how he needs to change. And we'll see there's more of that goes on there. I want to go ahead and jump to the introduction of Roxy, which is in the movie. There's this cloud zipping over Scott's head. He said, "I've had a hard day at work. Fight me in the morning." Actually, more like noon. I have to work again. And so Scott punches her, and
He hit a girl.
Right in the
girl,
boob.
right in the boob. Well, in fairness to Scott, he did not realize that it was a girl
Yeah, I know.
when he punched her, making puking sounds. God, whatever. I was just toying with you. Obviously, prepared to die. Should I know you have kind of a bad memory? Which is a plot point. Funny, Scott, because everyone always remembers you, don't they? Which is
that's kind of true.
This line did not make it in to the movie, and it really should have.
Oh yeah, I wish it did.
That's a great line. But of course, the whole idea of Nega Scott doesn't really doesn't really show up there. So it turns out that Roxy there is Ramona's ex, and the first ex that is not specifically mentioned as a boyfriend. Because like before in the previous volumes, until the very end of volume 3, it just refers to ex-boyfriends every time the exes are mentioned. Like whether that's a change.
There's a line here where Scott realizes she keeps correcting him and saying ex, not ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, that's new to volume 4.
It is? Oh.
Yes, I went back and looked the first time I read it to just double check myself. But yeah, it's new to volume 4. Or at the end of volume 3, I think is the first time there's something like that happens. But in the notes and in the rest of it, it's always either she lets it slide or whether that's something that O'Malley decided to change after he'd already started. Tweak or however that shook out. You have that in there. So
I would imagine, because this happens a lot, even for myself, that he didn't have all of the exes in mind when he wrote it. And as he came along, he'd like, oh man, since all of them have been boys up to this point, wouldn't it be really funny if one of them was actually a girl? And that's probably just how that ended up happening.
So,
right.
If I remember correctly, in the movie, when he finds out that's the case, does he not look at her like heartbroken and she practically has to, make an excuse for it? Whereas here, he's like flipping out. He thinks it's the...
No, it's about the same in the movie.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it's probably just the way you're reading Michael Cera's expressions, but he's kind of like almost anxious, like, wait, what? Wait, you had a sexy phase? It's like it's almost exactly the same. It's just in a different environment when he actually figures out. Right. And his brain even almost, they have a different thing. Instead of his brain cracking and he got it, they had like this spinner that lands on finally gets it. But it's still like the same joke.
See, I get the impression he was turned on by the idea here.
Well, yeah, they actually mentioned that in. Well, yeah, and you wouldn't call it a sexy phase if you didn't find it appealing, would you?
Yeah,
that's in the movie. That line is word for word in the movie.
He says, "Wait, you have a sexy phase?"
It was a phase. You dated a girl. It was a phase. You had a sexy phase.
I do not remember.
So.
Yeah, and then she said I was a little bi-curious, and then she says,
but I'm
a little bi-furious, and that's where the fight starts.
Right. So here we go. After the fight with the samurai sword guy, and Scott's back at work. He notices through the little window that Ramona is talking to the ninja girl, who is a half ninja. However, that's supposed to work.
On her father's side.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows?
I think the implication. If I may, I think the implication there, if we go with the other themes of the book, the bit of depth I interpret from that, because the other parallel story to that side of things is Knives' story, and Knives' story with her father is essentially there's her arc, but her father's arc, who the father's trying to kill Scott for a chunk of time. And the idea there is the essentially the stereotypical prejudiced Oriental father who's like, you're dating a white boy. And so at the end of that, he goes, you know what? Scott's not so bad. You dating a white boy wouldn't be so bad. And I think the constant references to half ninja may in fact be a reference to her being like a mixed race child. Like mother,
Oh no, I think so. Yeah.
yeah.
Really?
So that
It's
idea being
multi-layered
half,
too.
yeah, being half ninja, it's like you're half like Japanese.
Well, see, that's
She's
interesting
also
because Ramona's
a
ninja.
very bad ninja too,
first-
because she's half ninja, so she's kind of like lazy about it as well. Like there's multiple layers to this.
And there's
thing.
those references of like her mother. I think it might be
Yeah.
Japanese mother having like a tiger mom essentially, who's constantly like disappointed in her.
The
So
first thing I
that was
noticed-
the impression I took
Yeah.
from that.
The first thing I
and
noticed.
I
was
thought
that
it might be a
American.
training thing because Ramona's specified as an American ninja in things. An American Ninja delivery girl at one point, like as if that's supposed to mean something. It's such a, I mean, I love it, but it's also ridiculous.
That was my first note. It was like, wait, so all Americans are ninjas? Is that the deal?
No, Ramona learned it in
No.
college.
They went to a college for that. That's
Yeah,
what they did.
the College of Carolina in the Sky,
Yeah.
University of Carolina in the Sky.
Yeah, and there's a whole thing about almost like this vague Orientalism, right? Because like Knives is also somewhat depicted as a ninja, and her dad is almost like a ninja samurai, but they're not even Japanese. They are specifically Chinese, right? So that kind of overt Asian stereotyping is all over the place.
I think
Yep.
O'Malley just has a ninja fetish. That's probably why it didn't work out with
Yeah,
Luke
probably.
Harrison. Yeah.
I mean, obviously his.
Oh my God.
is inspired by anime.
I mean, am I wrong?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not gonna plum that well.
I feel like
Anyhow.
the facts speak to my thesis, my hypothesis.
You
know,
think
I'm gonna
everybody
agree
has
with
a
you.
fetish, though?
I'm gonna be on Twitless' side for this.
Sure. That's okay. Moving on. So Scott notices that the half ninja girl and Ramona are outside in the restaurant. Oh, I forgot to mention Scott has not mentioned to Ramona that he's working anywhere yet. He got a
He
job.
keeps forgetting to.
Keeps forgetting to mention it. It just skips his head with everything going on. In fairness, there's some stuff going on. And this is one of those moments, right? Where it really points out to what Roxy's doing in the story. Ramona is talking about Scott and Lisa, right? And Ramona says, so they used to be friends a long time ago. And then Roxy says, so you'd almost forget I'm talking to Ramona Flowers, expert on cheating. Are you blind? And like that's the ticket right there, where Roxy explains part of Ramona's past that has not gotten a mention. It's gotten alluded to because of how she left Matthew Patel, how she left Lucas Lee, and that sort of thing, but it really didn't get mentioned explicitly. So this whole thing, Ramona says, how does a girl like you get to be a girl like you? Sure, it's just sad and pathetic, Roxy replies, and you do it every time but hey, it's no business of mine, right? So basically she's pointing out that Ramona has had moral failings, and we don't see in the film any of Ramona's moral failings. She could easily be portrayed as a victim of bad taste throughout the whole movie. In the comic, we see that she's definitely at fault, overtly, directly at fault for some of the things that have happened in her life. And Roxy seems to be a consequence of that, right?
And
So
this
Scott-
confrontation actually shows that she's changing as a person, because she is not the person that Roxy recognizes. If this was past Ramona, she wouldn't have put up with this. None of this would happen. She would have been the one cheating on him and not the other way around.
So Jim says American Ninja was a terrible series of 1980s cheap karate movies featuring I can't remember his name, Lee Van Cleef. As in Angel Eyes from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. as an American Ninja. It was amazing. It was horrible, but amazing. Okay, moving on. So yeah, so we see that whole thing. Scott is questioning what is going on. That what are you even doing here? We were and Scott demands to know what's going on. Ramona says, "Oh, we were roommates," and yeah, sure, we were roommates, right? So that was the thing.
I just
So
realized Canadians do not use the word flat.
use the word what?
Flatmate instead of roommate.
Oh, flatmate.
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's more like across the pond.
that's a British thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's
We don't call them flats here. Why would they call them flats up north?
Even though
They say
what
university.
Ramona is living in is actually a lot closer to a flat, but you see those a lot in the north period, right? And also
Right.
on the other coast. You don't see those type of apartments like necessarily around where I am.
Well, the other thing to think about, like they were roommates in college in a dorm room in America. So
True.
right. So
But would the writer think about that?
Yes,
so
he is the one who wrote it.
well, I mean, he was at this
So, but
point
would he
married
think
to
about
an
the
American.
language difference? Or would he
Yeah,
just call
he
it
was
what
at this
he's
point
used to?
married to an American. So
Also true.
yeah.
Also, there's not
So-
really that many language differences between Americans and Canadians, to be honest. I have
We
a
say
lot of
things
Canadian
different,
friends,
a lot
and
of
we say most of the same things. They just sometimes have a weird accent about it.
They call
Okay.
college
So-
university.
Well, it depends which one you go to. I went to a university twice.
A university.
moving
But
on.
you don't say I went to university.
No, I try not to talk about it much. Unless it comes up in conversation. Okay, moving on. So let's try to get through here. We start the big bad action fight. Roxanne Richter, the fourth evil evil ex-boyfriend. I'm not a boy. As if that wasn't fairly obvious. So, while they are fighting, and let me, we have the it starts off with instead of having the fight with the mallet, Ramona pulls out a bat, and so that's part of that whole bit. One of the gets changed from the movies. The mallet was in with Envy, so.
Well, of course, because I mean, even though she is a girl, she would still have the same modifiers. Like you want to use the tool that's specific to the job. So she's fighting a blonde.
Yeah.
You'd want the one that gives you the plus against blondes.
Right. The titanium bat. See. Badoo. Jeez. Okay.
Those
So-
are banned. You are not allowed to use that at baseball.
Titanium bats makes sense
Yeah.
because they bend. Okay. So one of the other fun bits, I think this is the first time it's revealed that Ramona's bag is itself a subspace storage area. So Scott's able to fit all of himself in there for if you need any more science fiction. And then the girls continue to have a roller skate fight, which is hilariously ridiculous to that whole thing. So trekking along, and there's this huge knockdown drag out fight inside of subspace.
I wonder whose brain they're in.
They're not necessarily in a brain. They went through a door to get there, so not everybody's brain is hooked up to subspace, but Scott's is. But
Well, don't forget the end, though.
there are ways. Oh yeah, at the end of the
Right.
yeah, at the very end we get to that. They do end up.
So it makes me think maybe it is connected to somebody's brain.
Well, the subspaces
think-
could be anywhere. They could be somebody's brain. They could be some other dimension. Like they're supposed to just be ambiguous spaces that could be in any.
Maybe there's
like,
a metaphor
chain of
going on
system.
here that fantasy, right, is a place you escape to inside your head, where all these crazy things can happen.
So-
But all the crazy things happen in real life too in this world.
Yeah. Okay.
So okay. honestly, I think let me scroll down here. I think we're at the point where we just need to get to the very end of the story. Oh, okay. So, Scott gets kicked out of his apartment because Wallace has somebody over. Scott can't get a hold of Ramona because she's not answering the phone, and he ends up staying the night with Lisa and Lisa's sister on their couch or whatever. And then the next day, where they have a heart-to-heart about being young people together and all that kind of stuff. And then the next day, they end up going to Ramona. He ends up getting his job back, and then we find out the whole story about Knives' dad, and then they end up here. So Scott himself dives into. He sees a door with the subspace highway symbol on it. He dives into it, and he ends up here.
Oh, that's right. Now this was a bit disturbing.
Yes, right. And so here is this anonymous person, like in the shadows back here, and Ramona is subservient beneath this fellow, and realizes the Scott's there, and realizes that he is in Ramona's dream, and she throws him out of her dreams, saying, what the whole deal is, and trying to find out. Scott's like, well, what's going on with all of this? And she's super embarrassed, and they talk about the fact he just came from Lisa's house, and she says, are you in love with her? Well, no, I'm in love with you. And we find out that Roxy stayed over because she needed someplace to stay, and nothing really happened, blah, 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 blah.
They only made out for a little while.
We made it out for a little bit, right?
That was the most ridiculous line.
Right, yeah.
I don't think Scott would mind that, though, because he probably finds it sexy. He's the type of idiot that wouldn't care.
Right. So Scott is faced with this character. This is Nega Scott, and we're going to see what that's all about in the next volume. But
there's something very specific that maybe people in the audience too, who are basically going through this for the first time with us, right? And then the other people on the panel, you keep seeing these lines around Scott and Ramona's head when they are stressing, and that gets explained later. But you got to keep paying attention to those lines every time they come up.
Right. And so Nega Scott is then seems to be dissipated as Scott decides that he's serious about Ramona. But he's accosted by Knives' dad, and Scott runs upstairs and lures him, Knives' dad, by Roxy, because they both have swords, and so they end up having a fight.
This has been happening in the book. Every time he won't fight someone, the excuse is they've got a sword and he doesn't. And
right.
Every time I just pictured this.
He's got a sword. That's hilarious.
You fool! We all have swords! You could also just call him Mr. Chow if it's easier than saying Knives' dad over and over again.
Yeah, that would make sense, but for some reason that wasn't ticking in my head at all. So Mr. Chow, they're having a fight. And Scott says, Am I a pussy, Ramona? Well, you could be less of one, I guess. And Scott decides he's gonna man up. And here's this thing. I know you're just play mysterious and aloof to avoid getting hurt. I know you have reasons for not answering my questions. I don't care about that stuff. Ramona, I'm in love with you. And I know we can make this work. And so then Scott levels up with the power of love, and that's a big flaming sword. And so then he faces off against Roxy. And here's one of Twitless's least favorite things is they have Scott's like, glad I picked up a longsword proficiency in grade 5. It's a really quick fight. It's several pages long. It's one wound, and
I did admit.
Actually, I smiled at the. I'm a big Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons guys, so the longsword proficiency thing made me smile.
It did end
Right.
a bit anticlimactically for what seemed like was being set up. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, that's what that our thing is it was the one attack, right? So like you've repeatedly mentioned Twitless how it's like Scott has, one punch and he wins these fights. And what's up with that?
Yeah.
But
this one thematically, like in terms of what they're riffing on, like I get it because it's the anime, Flash one shot.
It would have been nice if something had happened before that, so we could actually use that gosh darn sword. He just worked so hard to earn,
I was gonna say one thing I liked about the longsword proficiency thing though is that it's actually a callback to earlier when he beat Lucas Lee and got the skateboard, and he's like, I never picked up skateboard proficiency in grade 5, right? So now you found out what he picked up instead.
Yeah.
So I had never picked up on that, but the thing about it is that with this, when it comes to, and my one defense of the one hit kill in this one is that it wasn't actually the knife that did it, right? It wasn't actually the sword that issued it. It was the fact that, like, because the big theme is that Scott is defeating like Ramona's baggage from her evil exes, right? That's part of it. And what he did is he's actually willing to commit, the thing that Ramona hasn't been able to do, and the reason things didn't work out with her and Roxy, or with Lucas or whatever, is that she has been inconstant. And Scott is saying, I'm going to be constant, right? Which is not something that Scott has been willing to say before, but it's really Scott's willingness to commit that is actually the thing that is defeating Roxy. It's not just the sword play. It's
and he leveled up, so he does more damage now.
Well, there you go. Of course. Although I think it's funny that this is the one of the X's that he defeats that doesn't end up with any money. It turns into these free animals and they're useless in game. So.
Oh well, clearly that was a Sonic the Hedgehog reference.
Yes. It's a double entendre where it's a reference to when you defeat an enemy in Sonic, the machines have an animal inside them and it releases the animal. But also because she's a lesbian, she releases cute, fluffy animals instead of money.
Huh?
Is that something lesbians do?
I don't get that.
It's just about, you make fun of gay culture and stuff in general. It's just like common jokes that they're just, well, and girls in general too, but they're just cute and stuffed animals and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're primed for that because of the reference to Sonic on page 1. So it's
So, well, then Scott and Ramona move in together, and there's this mysterious reference to the twins coming up, and then Scott has spent the rest of the summer, and I think Lisa is moving away. That's the last where this kind of ends, is with Lisa's going away party, and Scott and Ramona find out how old she actually is, and so there you have the end.
Skipped by one of the best pieces of artwork in the entire book there, especially once you see it in color.
Which one is that?
That whole spread right there.
Oh, okay, I can see
proof that as an artist, he is not willing to cut corners. Hey, there are how many characters in this image?
I have never counted, but it's
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Can you name them? Okay.
As a matter of fact, again, skip to mine if you would, because we got color here. And for the first time for a second, until I realized this was Kim, I had completely failed to recognize Ramona because she didn't have unnaturally colored hair. I'm like, who's this redhead over here?
Oh yeah, yeah.
First I
enough.
thought it was him, and then
So, okay. Well, I think that will leave it next week, Volume 5. Any closing thoughts?
all I can say is, if I end up loving the next book, I'm going to be really ticked.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Oh, so we're going to finish up. We'll finish up the pilgrimage here in 2 weeks, and then we are going to be doing a deep dive into the Ideal Comics lore with guest Matt Krotz. And so that will be exciting. Yep. And Matt is going to come in and quiz me on all of our stuff. So if you want to find out specific things about us, about our universe, DM me or message me on Twitter or whatever, so I can prepare some visual aids. Make it more
That's a lot
interesting.
cooler than what your teaser title suggested in my head. I'm like, is this just going to be another Ideal Comics jam night, or?
No. We're looking into some of the. I was telling Matt some stuff, and he's like, "I want to know more about this story." So I'm like, "Okay, quiz me. Come on my show and quiz me." So that's the story, and then Thanksgiving, and the week after that, Comics Creators Club, with Oi, Tales of Bardic Fury, and Ninu of the Dinosaurs, and then
Cool.
I think at that point we are going to be into December, and hopefully, I think, fingers crossed, my favorite Green Lantern comic. So see how that shakes out.
Fun.
That's what we got. That's what's happening. Next thing you know, it's going to be Christmas. I'm gonna be figuring out what that's all about. But so, we are going to go ahead and wrap the show here. And this was a long one, but I appreciate you guys for hanging on. And until next time, go read some comics. And may I suggest, I just finished the 10th volume of Spy X Family, and whoo, that was some fun comic book right there, man. Okay, get out there, get out here, get the show's over. Bye. Oh,
Peace.
and go Omega Girl. There you go. The other ones. Sorry, I didn't give you guys enough time.
No, that's
I'm
perfect.
trying to wrap
That's
things
cool.
up. I'm terrible.
No, we're good. We dropped the links. We're good.
just
Oh,
stay
good. Bye. I'm really leaving. I swear it.